introduce Rob Ramsdell, who is the Vice President at Cambridge Education, and Roger Fry will be joining him. He's a professional lead at Cambridge Education. I'm going to turn this over now to Rob and Roger.
Great. Thank you so much, Corinne, and thanks everybody for joining the call. This is Rob Ramsdell, and just because it's always nice to know who's talking, this is Roger, who is actually sitting to my left as well as on the left side of the screen that hopefully you're all seeing, and Rob Ramsdell, and we're really glad to both be here with you. In terms of just providing an overview of what we're hoping to do in the next half hour, I'll provide some quick context and background about Cambridge Education, and then hand it over to Roger, who's the professional lead for all of our work around effective classroom observation in the United States. He'll provide an overview of our general approach to effective classroom observation, and then get a bit more into some of the details of what the implementation of this work looks like. Roger is steeped in the work, leading projects in Florida mostly at the moment, but literally, as of 2 days ago, was working arm in arm with districts around this issue of rater reliability and consistency, and doing training and development work. So I'm really glad that you'll be able to hear from him directly. And then we'll obviously have a good chunk of time for Q&A. Just to provide a little bit of background about Cambridge Education, though we're actually sitting here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Cambridge Education is actually based in Cambridge, UK, and we're part of a UK consulting organization called Mott MacDonald, which does work in about 140 countries and is focused particularly on large-scale projects in the public sector, with Cambridge Education being the education division of that larger consulting organization. In the U.S., currently we're doing a lot of work around teacher evaluation, as well as supporting school turnaround and transformation work, and have a long experience doing work in the domain of district and school accountability, particularly using some of our experience in the UK with the UK inspection model. In terms of projects in the U.S., on the right side of the screen, you'll see the range of states we're currently working in. Probably we've added a few more, but I'll give you a sense of the geographic distribution for the work we're doing. In terms of teacher evaluation work in particular, there are two areas that we're particularly focused on. We operate the Tripod project and lead the work around the use of the Tripod student perception surveys that many of you may know are part of the Gates Measures of Effective Teaching project. And then we do a lot of the work, which will be the focus of today's discussion, around building capacity for effective classroom observation. Just to set the context in terms of what really drives us as individuals, and I think I can certainly speak for Roger and me, but I think as an organization, in terms of what gets us to work and excited about the work every day, we have a real passion for working in partnership with districts and states and other partners, a real conviction around building local capacity, with a strong emphasis on always making sure that we can connect the dots to a focus on student learning, and ultimately for us the rubber meets the road when we're delivering high quality work with educators around the country. Just to take on a question that I'm guessing is probably on people's minds at the outset here, the issue of particularly with states and large districts concerned about scaling up this type of work. The issue of capacity, deliver, and cost, I'm sure is on people's minds. As it relates to the capacity to deliver, as an organization, I think we're particularly known for scaling up pretty large-scale projects quickly and having a sort of deep resource of associates and full-time staff to tap into. So one example of that would be the work we did starting in 2007, where we went from a standstill to doing school quality reviews of all 1,400 of the New York City schools in the course of a year. And then another example, which Roger led in Florida, was training all of the administrators in Florida in their effective classroom observation work using the Danielson rubric. I need to say, actually, that I made an error. It's 900 administrators who have been trained and supported through the whole program. It was only 750 administrators who were trained in the first 3 months of the project in 2010. In terms of cost issues, we kind of pride ourselves in not selling a package, but rather tailoring the approach, based on local needs. So our costs are, typical, I think, of consulting organizations, competitive with consulting organizations, but we don't have a single model and cost structure. And part of the reason that Roger will be focusing in on some of the work we're doing in Florida is that, every client is different in terms of the emphasis on really having us do everything in terms of the training and capacity building, to examples where our focus is really around training trainers and the quality assurance work associated with scaling up. So with that, just to remind us of our roadmap, that was our, hopefully provided you with some helpful context and background, and we'll transfer it over to Roger to give an overview of our general approach to the work.
Thanks very much, Rob, and good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for listening this afternoon. I'm going to take you through several aspects of the work that we've done mostly to do with the districts and counties of Florida. And the slide that you have now is one from the MET project. And I just want to take you through this so you can see the flow of what we're trying to do here. So we have multiple measures of effectiveness on the left, accurate teacher evaluation, which is what Cambridge comes in on, and then go to the bottom of the next large arrow, targeted professional development and other teacher supports, causing more effective teaching and better student outcomes. And that is really at the core of what we're trying to do with all the work that we have in this area. So I'm going to take you through now several of the work, examples of several pieces of work that we are working on or have worked on in Florida in the last 18 months. And in Hillsborough, for instance, we undertook a full training where all the administrators were trained by Cambridge, whereas in Pasco and Polk, we trained half their administrators and district staff, and also trained their key trainers who trained the other half. Whereas in Pinellas, our model has been to train the trainers and also offer all the administrators a day one introduction to the process of teacher evaluation systems. Whereas in Okaloosa, where I've just come from earlier this week, we were working on the calibration piece only because they had training carried out by other organizations. So you can see from that there's quite a range of different models that we can tailor to your local needs and within your budget constraints. And we are perfectly happy always to talk about, what the costs are going to be and what can be done for a certain amount of money. We are very much an organization that focuses on building capacity for rate of consistency and reliability. Our assumptions in this work, well, here they are. Here are three of them, that all the stakeholders need to be able to trust the systems that we put into place, that the evaluation systems obviously therefore must be rigorous and valid and reliable, and that the quality of teaching is the single most important thing that we're thinking of when we're working in classrooms, because that has the biggest impact on student learning and student achievement. I'm going to put down an early marker here and say that through all this work, no matter what we do, whichever model is adopted by a county or a state, it's what it all boils down to is the next steps that each teacher has so that they are able to change their behaviors for the better, improve their teaching, and improve the life chances of all their students because of better achievement. And those next steps need to be followed up very carefully and rigorously and frequently to make sure that the teachers are making those agreed next steps. And sometimes it's necessary for there to be a reworking of those next steps to the point where they are almost freshly set again until the teacher achieves them and then they work on, presumably, a next set. The next slide is about technical assistance, training, and development. Now, I want to focus with this slide on the technical assistance, because each of the counties that we work with in the state of Florida has been very appreciative, is my impression, about the amount of knowledge that we have in order to help them set up their teacher evaluation systems. So we provide advice on quite a wide range of things, such as the choice of rubric, the kinds of forms that teachers and observers will fill in, and what kind of records are going to be kept, schedules for training as well, which are absolutely crucial because we're visiting a lot of schools with most of our models, and we're going into schools to see what's going on in there, and we're practicing in real classrooms so that we have the full 100% of things going on in front of us for our training. We answer a lot of what-if questions, and they are unique to each county and state. The work with stakeholders is, of course, crucial, and we make suggestions about how that can happen. I think what has surprised, if that's the right word, quite a number of our clients is just to what depth this process that Cambridge puts into place goes into. It really is a deep dive, and we are very much mirroring what the Gates Foundation wanted, which is a much closer look at the learning aspect as well as the teaching aspect of teacher evaluation systems. So our ways forward look like this. So we support, therefore, all rubrics to help measure teacher effectiveness, multiple observers and evaluators to triangulate judgments, and some counties and states have gone for a model where they have peer assessors and peer mentors to literally provide the third leg of that observation process. We support the formal and informal observation tools with feedback. We very much support the agreed prescriptive professional development and next steps. And mentors for new teachers and induction programs, we build that into our process if that's what a state wants. We work with the New Teachers Center to do that. And we have, obviously, extensive training programs for evaluators in all sorts of ways that I've just outlined. The process itself is one that you'll be very familiar with. I think the difference perhaps is that we perhaps do it at greater depth. So the pre-observation conference, where the teacher is asked by the administrator what they're going to be doing, how they are going to be occupied, what the students will know, understand, and be able to do by the end of the lesson or the week's lessons, and to get a sense of what's going to happen in that classroom on that day. The pre-observation conference is very important because it gives confidence to the teacher, and it allows, in 5 or 10 minutes, no more than that, an opportunity for the observer, the rater, or the administrator to be able to find out what's happening in the lesson. The observation of lessons, Cambridge puts in a number of key areas here. We recommend a selected scripting approach where the rater of the lesson, the administrator, doesn't try to record everything and doesn't try to write down everything that was said or done, but selects out the key patterns and the key recurring themes in the lesson so that we have an opportunity to feed back in terms of the key areas of strength, the key areas for improvement, which lead into the next steps. The post-observation conference is a more lengthy meeting, which is a combination of the teacher and the administrator meeting together to form, shall we say, an axis, if you like, for improvement, where the teacher will naturally want the administrator to know and to give those key areas of strength and those areas for development. And they often particularly want to know how to improve what they've done so far. But it's also about agreeing the post-observation steps, those next steps, which are so crucial. Right, here's a table of the kinds of observation that Cambridge supports, and they'll again be very familiar to you, I think. So just a moment there, just to scan down and have a look at anything there that you might want to ask a question about later on. We do recommend that records are kept of all visits to classrooms. And we also recommend that the walkthroughs become much more focused into following up on those next steps that the teacher has been given within 2 to 3 weeks. So there's at least a follow-up walkthrough. It might be something, for example, to do with the teacher putting the objectives for the lesson on the board clearly and in child-friendly language. And that can be done very successfully. That checkup can be made very successful by just making a walkthrough, and several could be done in a very short period of time. So that's where we see that fitting in. Okay, now next section. Details relating to implementation is our third bullet there. And on the next slide, we have really laid out here what 6 days of training might mean in a state or in a district. So we certainly recommend 2 days of face-to-face training. That means in a training center, in groups, where the trainees, the trainee administrators look at DVDs, video evidence, they look at ways of scripting, and with a real focus on the student learning, which is the output, which is obviously every school's key concern. We also then, interspersed with that, we have 2 days of shared observation practice in real-life classrooms where the administrators practice their writing skills, practice that selected scripting, practice how to rate different components, discuss them together, and calibrate in that way. And the Cambridge system is, throughout, very concerned with the whole process of calibration and bringing together inter-rater reliability. We start with it on day one when we're looking at video evidence, and it goes right through to virtually the final day where there's a checkup after 3 months. I know that many of you will be interested to know about how we actually certify our trainees, our administrators in different counties and districts and states. Well, we do it by having a 1 day of coached observation training where the trainees have a look at 2 pre-lesson conferences, then follow up with 2 lesson observations, and then 2 post-observation conferences in real classrooms. The purpose of this is to make sure that we get an opportunity to have a really good look to make sure that those raters of lessons, those administrators, are acceptably accurate in what they do and are ready to go. We follow up with a calibration after 3 months if a state would require that, and there, again, a trainer comes into the school, works with the administrative team, and everybody goes into a classroom with volunteer teachers and has a look at 2 lessons. And they come out, they prepare their selected scripts, they rate the components with whichever of the rubrics they're using, and they then discuss the results and see where the outlying components are and where they are in agreement, and generally come to a consensus to make sure that we're all still on the same page after 3 months. An important part of the training, too, is the information saving aspect and various IT matters, information technology matters. It's important that as much IT, I think, is used as possible to save time so that important comments can be moved from one form or tool to another. Now, what does it look like for an individual trainee? Well, it may look something like this, right? So this is quite an extended model. So day one, the trainee administrator would come in and work in that face-to-face situation in the training center or in a school center somewhere with a projector and so on with 20 others. And then they'd have their first day in school in the 1-to-4 ratio, looking at those shared observations, calibrating together, sharing the rubric scores, and making sure that their scripts are matching their scores and that the evidence matches well with what they've said. Day 3 is back into the training again, and there we're looking at the pre- and post-conference process. That's what we focus on there, plus 2 more ratings of lessons on video evidence. And then day 4, which is the second day in school, they go and try those out again in 1 to 4s. And there's some role play to go in there. And there are various things that have already been done before, but are practiced again, because we do believe that practice is extremely important with this. And that, in fact, everybody who's going to rate reliably needs about 10 visits to different lessons and different types of lessons before they should go live in their own schools, or however those lesson observations are going to be made. So you see the day 6 there, optional really, but computer training and also another opportunity to calibrate there. Please notice that I'm quite often asked, how long did it take to train the Hillsborough administrators? And there's an answer there. It took 3 to 4 months, in fact, foremost, to go through the process. And there were 630 there, and we did that just over a year ago. So an essential part of this process is the accuracy of the rater in terms of what they do day in, day out, and are they accurate after the 5th lesson they've observed in the day, or is it beginning to slide away? Now, every one of the contracts that we've been working in Florida has had a major calibration point to it. And in Okaloosa, a colleague and I have been working this week and last on how we can bring everybody together, make sure they're on the same page, make sure they've understood the same things from their training, so that the ratings are fair and equitable across the whole district and indeed the whole state. So, working in pairs or small groups, observe a lesson, record the balance of evidence, rate all the observable components, and compare ratings, citing the evidence, and finally agreeing ratings. Some essentials. I've mentioned this one already, but I'll say it again. Administrators need at least 10 practices using DVDs or video evidence and a mixture of DVDs and live lessons in school before they're ready to rate for real in their schools. This is because DVDs and video evidence, of course, does not contain all the information that we need, such as a capacity to discuss ideas with the students, such as a pre- and post-conference, and a whole load of other things that are going on in classrooms that you very well know, of course. Video evidence helps us, but it's only really half the story as we see it. So we are very keen on all our models in some shape or form to have personalized feedback for every trainee administrator. Without that, I would say, if we were to train in a group of 100, how could we possibly know that everyone in that room was on the same page or anywhere near it? Crucial point for us is that when we're carrying out these calibrations, that the trainer, at some point, whether the trainees are wildly keen or not, will take in the scripts that the trainees have offered and just make sensible, positive comments and areas and suggestions that the trainee administrator might improve upon. So, what we want out of this, of course, is a thorough understanding of what each component rating means in the classrooms and how to record evidence. Now, there are many rubrics out there for states and districts to be thinking about. It might be Dr. Marzano's, it might be Charlotte Danielson's, or it could be somebody else's, or a mixture. We are able to cope with all of this, and we add the pre- and post-lesson conferencing process to this. We add a way of scripting, or we will adapt a way of scripting that you may already have going in your state, and we try to work with existing lesson evaluation rubrics and protocols, if that's what you want, or we can help with the creation of new evaluation rubrics and protocols. Now, all that means that we are very flexible, and we can help you with whatever it is that you need. And quite often, such as in Virginia, there will be a rubric, and we're often asked, Roger, is this rubric up to scratch? Will it do the job? And we'll have a look at it together. So we'll try and build on what the state or the district has already got in place, so there isn't that sense of building what we don't need to build. Now, a validation engine is being prepared by the Gates Foundation, AIR, and Empirical Education to actually give all schools that wish to participate and districts an opportunity for some online calibration work. This is a relatively low-cost way of calibrating after the initial training, after the administrators have gone live and they are rating lessons and teachers and components of rubrics in their schools. So there's a data platform with this that hosts the scoring, and Cambridge is involved in the beginning work of training different districts within states on this. So it's at the pilot stage, and it's intended to keep a check on the accuracy of rated judgments and to also validate the lesson observation rubrics to see whether they are actually judging what we think they're judging. Here are some of the intended outcomes. I think by saying outcomes, I'm being perhaps a little bit ahead of myself here, so I'm going to add a word to this, which is expected or intended outcomes. There will be detailed calibrations of lesson components. There will be accurate feedback to teachers and open conversations between administrators and teachers. Well-chosen next steps should emanate from those post-conferences, leading to improved teaching and consequent student achievement. Teachers are beginning to think more about student learning. I can confirm that one from Hillsborough experience. And principals are looking differently at teaching and learning. They are turning away from just being site managers into instructional leaders. And they're beginning to think about how that can be done when there are perhaps 40, 50, or 60 observations to be made in a fairly short period of time for each of the APs as well, maybe in a large school. So that is something that is really taxing, I think, a lot of administrators at the moment, and Cambridge has some suggestions for helping out with that really change of outlook about what the job is about. Okay. Question and answer time.
Okay, this is Corinne. I'm back in the room, and as we did last time, we still have about 17 people on the line, so we are going to have folks use the raise your hand feature, which is just below the participant window. If you click on the raise your hand button like I'm doing right now, a number will appear, and we can call on you. Oops. Actually, can you scroll up, Rob? There we go. And be undone. Does anyone have any questions? You can unmute your phone and raise your hand, and then unmute your phone to ask questions of Rob and Roger. I thought I heard to unmute. I'll start. I had a question on the last thing that Roger just spoke of. In the burden on principals and assistant principals as far as scheduling and doing this work and then collecting all this data and getting it back to a central place, do you have any tools or any advice on helping them manage that work?
If I've understood your question, Corinne, I think it's all about using information technology, computers and iPads successfully so that the administrators are only really writing basic information once, and they are able to move it from document to document.
Right, and that's exactly it. Are there platforms to do that you know of, or is that something you collaborate with the district? Yeah,
there are various collaborations going on with companies that we work with, and also within districts. There are often well-qualified information technology people who are able to write their own programs, and even quite small districts have managed to do that. So it's a good cost saving if you have the expertise there, or you can go out to outsource to other organizations that are, of course, recommended. So
as long as there aren't questions, the presenters are happy to ask each other questions. So, one thing that I wanted to ask you, Roger, is it strikes me that your description, and your experience is more deeply rooted in a scenario where we are providing a lot of the training directly. And particularly with states on the phone, imagining, for example, the 6-day model and that you described, what would that look like if instead of us delivering it, a state was delivering it? And can you envision that kind of transition from, from a scenario where we're doing things at a large county level to a state level?
Yeah, I think what would have to happen would be a train-the-trainers model, where the chosen people from a particular state or large district or small district would be trained by us, and then we would quality assure a small number or whatever the agreed number of schools was where that training had taken place, and the administrators were working in order to keep a close check on what it is that we feel that the successes and any areas for improvement there that we could work on.
Any questions from out in the field? We'll use some wait time.
This is Corinne again. I had a question about the calibration portion of what you were discussing. And how frequently are you actually out at the district to do calibrations? Like, how frequently do you recommend that a principal or other administrators that are trained are recalibrated and checked in? And is that something that the districts could do themselves? Do you have them review a video and submit back, or is it a kind of in-person type thing?
There are several different models as ever. We would recommend after the initial training that there was a calibration of all administrators who had been through the training after 3 to 4 months. And then after that, probably yearly, so that everybody just gets that little reminder about, the importance of rating fairly and making sure they get the balance of evidence, making sure that they're using the rubric properly and not beginning to interpret it in their own particular individual way, and so on.
I see a raised hand from Lisa Laughlin. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Rob and Roger. This may be getting us a little bit off topic, but I'm curious to know if you have done some work in developing summative ratings. I know that you do work with the tripod survey, and so I'm wondering if you've been thinking about how to integrate these observation scores with student survey scores or with student growth scores, and if you have any sort of software package that does all of that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and as you can imagine, one that we're all wrestling with as the field is rapidly developing in this area. And just to say that we have a lot of expertise and experience as it relates specifically to the tripod analysis. Through our partnership with Ron Ferguson, who developed that, and other analysts, and obviously through the partnership with the MET project. We aren't a research shop, and I actually anticipated this question might come up. When we get questions, from clients asking us for advice in this area, we work closely with an organization in Michigan called Basis Policy Research, and also other organizations. Basis happens to be an organization that we've been working closely with recently in a few different districts, but we're also eager to find other partners who bring that deeper expertise looking across measures, and particularly with an emphasis on sort of more of the science of computing summative scores. So I wanted to just be clear that, as an organization, we have a focus on tripod specifically, and then most of the work around teacher evaluation systems is more focused on the sort of human infrastructure that Roger described today, and then we would look to partners to, either, for the kind of software that you might be imagining and the capacity around the kind of research analysis necessary to create those summative scores.
May I pick up on that question as well? At the technical support stage, it's quite common that districts show us the range of different forms and tools they're going to use. And of course, one of those is the summative record. And we make recommendations on really taking the counties and districts on from where they are, how far they've got with it. And we try and sort of dry run some scores to go through it and see what comes out and whether that is what the county or district really wants to happen. So I've done that with 2 different counties recently.
Great, thank you.
And I had one final question. You mentioned that in your work with Hillsborough, it took about 3 or 4 months to train all of those administrators, and that, I believe they used the Danielson rubric?
That's right.
Okay. I was wondering, if you were working with a client, say a state has developed their own rubric, how much lead time do you need to kind of get ready and to prepare trainings and materials to kind of go in and to do that type of work?
I would need, ideally, 3 months with a well-tuned team to write all the different observation forms pre, post, and during the lesson, summative records, and also different sorts of advice crib sheets, if you like, just pointers and reminders for administrators to use so that they are recording the right information, the agreed information, and so on. So 3 to 4 months would be good as a lead-in time with a small team in the whole state to bring us up to speed and also give us a chance to get everything approved by the unions and the boards of educators and people who are responsible for approving different documentation, because of course that takes time.
Follow-up question from Lisa?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. I'm curious to know, I mean, that's quite a bit of time, and it seems like there are a lot of states that already have the majority of that work done, and so they are maybe looking for an expert to come in and support them in some of the implementation steps. If they already have those pre- and post-observation forms, the rubric developed, what does that timeline look like?
Much shorter. If a state or county or district has everything in place, we were able to be up and running with Hillsborough within a month. And that was a large district, of course, of 240 schools, but I think it was about a month, and we had everything there, and we had our trainers trained, and we were ready to go. But it could be very rapid indeed, depending on the particular needs of a state. So I think it's possible to hit the ground running very quickly if that's what's necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly Burling?
Yes, I had a question about customization of the training and how you handle it for teachers of students with disabilities.
Yeah.
English language learners, if you do. I think that's...
Yes, we do. And we bump into this in every county and district. And what happens is that depending on which rubric is being used, so if you go to Charlotte Danielson's work, she has some different rubrics for different situations in her book, which are very useful to counties and districts. But also, where necessary, I sit down, or one of my more senior trainers will sit down for a morning or a day and go through a rubric, such as for the therapeutic services, for those children who are hard of hearing or have sight difficulties. And we sit down and work on, we draft out the changes to the rubric, and we've found that it's normally been in the highly effective range where those rubrics need changing. Does that answer your question?
It did. Thank you. I was already back on mute. Thank you very much for addressing.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions for Rob or Roger? You can see the contact information for Rob is on your screen, and again, this will be posted on our website.